shall we begin?
All right. Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Hail to the king, baby.
What's in the box?
Precious. I'm vengeance.
This is going to be quite the ride.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian Renteria. It has been quite a while, and I apologize for that. But we're not going to get into that because we have enough to get into this podcast. 2023 has come and gone, and what a year! Honestly, in general, what a year. But in terms, again, just to keep this concise and on topic. In terms of the movie world, it has also been a pretty big year too. Obviously, we had 2 major strikes this year. A lot of stuff got delayed because of those strikes, but we still got a lot of stuff that still came out anyway. And that's why I'm here. I am here to run down the movies, obviously, that I have watched this year in not 1, but 2 parts, because otherwise this podcast would be way too long to listen to do, and to edit. So just fair warning, if there are times where the audio just shifts every now and then, it's probably most likely because I have changed locations on where I'm recording. So bear with me for that. I knew that there was not going to be an opportune moment to record this podcast in one go. So just, fair warning ahead of time. So part 1, this part that you're listening to, hopefully you're listening to these in order. Part 1 will consist of a few categories that I have. Disappointments and least liked movies, of course, those are always fun to talk about. The Undetermined, which is a list of movies that I have watched and just can't find a proper place to put them. And I've kind of been introducing that into my end of the year list, in the last couple of years. Is that a cop out to have more movies on my end of the year list? Maybe, but it's also my podcast, so you have to deal with that. And also surprises of the year that came out. I have 2 surprises only this year, and of course we'll talk about those when we get to them. Okay, before we get to anything, I do have a list of big movies that I didn't get a chance to watch this year. And this year, for some reason, it is tremendously a lot bigger than other years, especially here near the end of the year, or, towards the end of the year last year, 2023. I just couldn't, so there was always something that came up or just anything. So the last few movies on this list are going to be a lot of big movies that everyone's going to be mad at me about, and I can already hear it. So I just want to tell you ahead of time, I'm sorry. So here's the complete list of not the complete list of movies, because I sure as hell missed a lot more of movies that I'm about to name. But these are the movies that I really wanted to watch and probably would have ended up on some sort of list. So Missing, Infinity Pool, Kill Book Soon, which is a movie on Netflix, Tetris, Ghosted, Beau is Afraid, Polite Society, Are You There? God, It's Me, Margaret, which I had no intention to watch, but then I kept hearing people really loving this movie, so I wanted to get a chance to watch it, and I didn't. Nimona, A Haunting in Venice, Priscilla, Past Lives, which I know is a very big one. Next Goal Wins, The Holdovers, which I know is, again, all these last movies are going to piss everybody off. Saltburn, May December, Leave the World Behind, Poor Things, American Fiction, and Maestro. Now, all those movies, and Ferrari, I forgot to add Ferrari to the list as well. All these movies will be watched at some point. Obviously, the Oscars are coming up. I'm going to have to do a lot of work to catch up on Oscar movies. A lot of those movies I just mentioned will definitely be mentioned around Oscar season. So I have a lot of work ahead of me, but I didn't want to keep holding off this list to watch those movies and potentially have them on there, because I just knew I wasn't going to have time and everything else going on in my life, and I'm sorry for that. So those movies will be watched at some point, and obviously I'll find time to mention them and talk about them, whether on Twitter or somewhere else. But yeah. All right, now let's get to the Undetermined. Again, these are movies that I've watched that I just still, even to this day, don't know what category to put them on. Also, just heads up, and I will mention this in part 2 as well, all these movies are in alphabetical order because I don't want to rank them. I used to rank movies on my end of the year list all the time. And over the last, I honestly think since I started the podcast some years ago, however many years, like 8 years ago. God, I've been doing the podcast that long. Anyway, I really stopped doing the ranking game on movies because I used to do it all the time before I started, having the podcast, even before I think I even had my YouTube account. I had a WordPress account, and that's all I will do. I would rank movies, and eventually it kind of got overwhelming, and I just don't want to do the ranking game anymore. So all these movies will be in alphabetical order. It drove me crazy ranking movies. It really did. So all these movies will be in alphabetical order on all the lists. So just, bear in mind, just because a movie's first on the list or because a movie's last on the list, it doesn't mean anything. Not really. All right, so the first movie on the Undetermined list, I have Asteroid City. Yes, this is a movie that sparked a little bit of controversy, a little bit of discourse, if you will, on when Variety put it on their worst movies of the year list. Wes Anderson's newest film was interesting, as all his movies are, to say the least. And again, like I mentioned, Wes Anderson is always going to be one of those filmmakers that not everyone is going to get or like, and that's fine, because he, makes his movies for the people that, enjoy his style and everything like that. And I have liked or have enjoyed the Wes Anderson movies that I have watched. And he definitely, like I mentioned, has his own style, which is unique to him. And he continues to do that, and he will continue to do it. Wes Anderson is not going to be one of those people that's going to change his style because people don't get his movies or because one of his movies ends up on a, worst of the year list. Where, honestly, Asteroid City, not the worst movie of the year, not even close to that. So Variety, I don't know what's going on over there. They really have their head in the sand, or that's a whole other discussion for another time. I don't want to give too much away. I will get into spoilers and stuff here and there, so that this is kind of your spoiler warning. But in terms for Asteroid City, I don't want to give too much away because the overall story and how Anderson structures the film is rather intriguing. It really is. And I wish we saw a little bit more of that, because when he finally, reveals what the movie is really about and kind of how it's working and everything, that stuff was really interesting. And I wanted to see a little bit more of that, especially considering how important it is at the end of the movie, with a very, very good scene, with a appearance by Margot Robbie. And the acting and the cast are great, and they're incredible, as it is always in Anderson movies. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Anderson film, but I did enjoy it for what it was. There was something kind of, I don't know, it's just something missing. Obviously, I don't know where to put it. There was just something missing about it. But it is definitely not the worst movie of the year. So I don't know where Variety is talking about. Scream 6. Listen, the Scream franchise, undoubtedly, everybody has this discussion anytime Scream is brought up. It changed the genre when it came out. And I'll be honest to say, of the sequels, I'm not the biggest fan of the sequels. Not all of them. I did enjoy Scream 2, Scream 3, and Scream 4, not so much. But then Scream 5 came out in 2022. And I thought it was a decent movie. I thought it was a decent return. I liked what Radio Silence was doing, and they were paying homage to it, but they were also doing their own thing. And that is, what you would want in these kind of movies. Now, Scream 6 was still trying to continue to do its own thing, but the execution for me just wasn't there. I don't think they used the New York setting as much as they could. I like the subway scene, but they used the hell out of that in their marketing campaign. I like the bodega scene. I like the ladder across the apartment scene. That was great. And I know the whole Neve Campbell, Sydney situation put some fans off. And I've said it, and I'm not going to hide from it. I think the Sydney story is pretty much done. And the only thing I think they have left for her to do is to either make her the killer or kill her off. And I don't think that Sydney deserves to be killed off, especially after everything she's been through. The movie itself, I wanted to like it more. I just couldn't really like it more than what they gave us. And of course, now there's the whole Melissa Barrera situation that happened. And, Christopher Landon, who has signed on to write and direct the movie, has left the project. I'm not going to get into that, but Scream 6 is definitely going to be in conversation for a lot of people of how to not mess up a franchise that is still very, very lively. That whole thing was just, that was a mess. But movie itself, so we're talking just about movies here, I just didn't quite land with me. So the next movie we're going to talk about, I think this is the last movie, right? Yes, this is the last movie. I don't know where to put. Gareth Edwards' new sci-fi film, The Creator. This was one of the most highly anticipated movies of the year once the trailer started coming out. Everyone was really hyped up about it. I was hyped up about it. Of course, Gareth Edwards, the director of the new Godzilla movie, he also directed a little indie movie called Monsters, which is really great. And I lucked out. This came out when I was in LA for vacation, and I saw it at the Chinese Theater, which, if you've ever been there, one of the best theaters you can go to, especially when it comes to terms to IMAX, because that screen is ginormous. So I think that might have played a slight factor in why it's on here on this part of the list. Visually, I think we can all agree The Creator is one of the best movies of the year. Visually, it truly is beautiful to look at, and Edwards has such a knack for elevating already real and established locations and implementing CGI to make those locations look real and lived in. He did it, with Monsters, which I just mentioned. If you haven't watched Monsters, I highly recommend you do, because Monsters is it's a low budget monster movie, and he did the most with it. And he did it here again with The Creator, because you think The Creator is this big, massive, big budgeted movie. It had a big budget, but in terms of, the scope of it, in terms of the visual effects about it and everything that, that went into that movie, it's not as expensive as, say, a Marvel movie or a superhero movie or anything like that. It was done, quote unquote, cheap to have such great visual effects that he did. So visually, again, great movie. Narratively is where it falls into some problems. It slows down a little bit in the middle, ruining its pretty decent pacing beforehand. It had a really great pace at the beginning, and then it got to the middle and then just kind of slowed everything down. And if it wasn't for that massive slowdown, I think the movie, if it kept that pace that it did in the beginning of the movie all the way through, I think we could have had a really great movie. And maybe another pass at the script probably would have helped too. This movie in no case is bad. Isn't a disappointment for others? Yes, I can see why it would be. I didn't see it so disappointingly. And again, maybe I don't think just because the theater, I just want to say, I made it sound like, because I saw the Chinese Theater, I'm just not going to put it on the disappointment list. No, but it's not. I think in terms of the other lists that you'll hear with my disappointments, The Creator doesn't deserve to be on that list, at least for me. So it could have been punched up a little bit, yes. But no way it is the worst movie. Disappointment, I can see that. I will give you that. But for me, not so much. All right, so let's get to the disappointments and least liked movies. I know this is always fun for a lot of people to talk about. So the first, like I mentioned, all alphabetical order. So the first one we're going to talk about is Expendables 4. The sequels to the Expendables have not been all that great. I hold exception to Expendables 2 because it did a little bit of course correction from the first movie and did rated R, and it was much more tongue-in-cheek. But the third one, I just no. And the fourth one, even more no. It felt like this one was just running through the motions. I like that Iko Uwais was in here, and he was playing the bad guy, of course, from the Raid movies. I just wish they had done a little bit more with him. His fight scene with Jason Statham is okay. Tony Jaa is in here for a glorified cameo and really a wasted character. And there are story decisions that are just dumb. Like there's one point where this movie makes you think that they actually pulled something off. And we're not dumb. The audience is not dumb. It's like, no, you didn't actually do that. But why would you even do that? If you had the balls to do that, that would be great. This will make this movie a little bit better. But you didn't. And it's insulting, really. It really was insulting. Just sitting there, it's like, no, you didn't. You did not just do what, okay, I guess you did. And where I had to sit through everything and do all this. I get that Stallone wants another franchise under his belt, but either let someone else take the reins or just finally let the franchise go. I mean, you probably could course correct and make these movies good again, but I don't know. I don't know about that. Five Nights at Freddy's. I talked about this on the Horror Pod in October, and I mentioned that I've never played the games, and I know very little to nothing about the lore, so the movie wouldn't really be for me in that regard. That said, the movie itself still didn't work for me, and I still hold that opinion even now. The execution for me was lacking. I saw some people saying that Five Nights at Freddy's was and could be seen as a gateway horror movie that, you could take your kids to see and that kids could potentially get into horror movies through that. And if you look at it that way, then yeah, I guess it does work. But I didn't think that's what they were going for. Maybe they were, and they just failed to execute that idea in the movie just didn't feel like that. So I couldn't get into it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The next one, Hypnotic. This was the new Robert Rodriguez movie with Ben Affleck playing a detective who goes after a shady character played by William Fichtner, who is a hypnotic person who can basically make people do what they want. He gets some help in the movie by Alice Braga's character, who knows about hypnotics and has some sort of connections to them, and his daughter has some sort of connection because they went missing and go. This movie is a mess. He sit here and I can explain what this movie is, and it still would sound like complete mess. And that's all you need to know. And it's not a good mess. It's not one of those movies where like, oh, maybe it's bad, it's good. No, it's just not good. It's not. I missed it in theaters. I watched it on VOD, and I still even regret watching it then. And I like Affleck. I like Alice Braga. I like Robert Rodriguez, but this wasn't it. On the next movie on the disappointments and least liked list, Silent Night. I am a big John Woo fan, and when I and every other fan, I'm sure, found out that Woo was coming back to direct an American action movie in over 20 years, we were all hyped. And the trailer came out, and we all became even more hyped, and then the movie came out, and that hype was just gone. Because this was really one of my big disappointments of the year. I, like many, I think, hoped and liked the ambitious approach of what they were doing with zero dialogue. Unfortunately, Silent Night took the approach of show, don't tell very seriously, and the execution was just a little bad. It didn't really nail, and I don't blame Woo. I think John Woo saw this idea and liked it and was like, I want to direct that. And Lionsgate was like, yes, sir, go right ahead. Unfortunately, not taking another pass at the script, because I think a lot of what makes this movie fail was the script. And I think that's what it was. It was a very, very weak script on that. And so I don't blame John Woo for that whatsoever. And that is saying something, because I am also not the biggest fan of Joe Kinnaman. I will give Kinnaman this. He does a great job in the movie, conveying his emotions with facial expressions and body language. And Kinnaman does have a presence about him. I will give him that. And he does that, very well here on Silent Night. Unfortunately, Silent Night is an overall bad movie. I think you just have to walk in knowing that this is not going to be a very dialogue heavy movie. There's no there's literally 2 lines in the whole movie, and they come from Kinnaman's wife's character. And even then, they're very, very, it's very low. It's almost like she was whispering them. So there's literally no dialogue in this movie whatsoever. Maybe upon some rewatches, we'll learn, to like it despite its pitfalls and whatever. But in terms of what it was, it just wasn't great. Here's another horror movie to the list, and I talked about this also on the horror pod as well. Exorcist Believer. And at the time, I said I wanted to like this movie more than I did, and that is still true. And this movie had an uphill battle trying to live up to the first movie, and fans will be weary because it was directed by David Gordon Green, who directed the new Halloween movies. I liked the first one. Part 2 was okay, and part 3 was part 3. But The Exorcist Believer is not a good movie. There are things that were good, like the opening scene in Haiti. Ann Dowd in the movie is very good, and some of the practical effects on the girls who were possessed were pretty good as well. But the rest of the movie, it is not good. It is sometimes borderline boring. And if I had to pick one movie to label a definitely disappointment of the year, it would be this one, because the trailer scared the crap out of me. It gave me, it made me uneasy, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. All right, so here's the last disappointment, least liked movie of the year, almost fitting, The Flash. What hasn't been said about this movie already? I know the movie has its defenders, which is totally fine. I have, and will never take anybody down or talk down to anybody who likes or loves a movie that I didn't like or love. That's not who I am. That's not who I ever will be, and that's not what, I want to do. And I wanted to like The Flash. I did. I wanted it to be good, because I know how long The Flash has been in development. I didn't want to be right. I didn't want The Flash to fail because I follow this movie every step of the way through the multiple starts and stops, through the different writers, directors. And I think the only time I've ever really lost my shit on this podcast has been because of Flash news. But this movie had so many things against it before it even came out. Of course, the most notable one is the Ezra Miller stuff. And then the rewrites and the reshoots and the rebooted DC Universe news, and whether this would be a part of it or not, even though out of all the characters of Flash, staying unaffected would make the most sense. But Miller's so problematic that they might need to, recast them. There was too much stuff on the outside to not let it affect the watching of this movie. And I will say, for some of this movie, I was enjoying myself. Not a lot of it, but there were some parts where I genuinely liked this movie. I did. And despite them being super problematic, not the best person in the world, Miller was actually pretty good in this movie. Miller had to carry a lot of weight in this movie, and they did it. They did their best. Sasha Calle as Kara / Supergirl was very good. Seeing Michael Keaton as the older Bruce Wayne Batman was also very cool and good, and arguably the best part of the movie. I don't care if it was only just nostalgia speaking, but then the movie keeps going, and the landing just doesn't quite stick. And some of that does have to do, unfortunately, with the special effects of the movie and everything that happened on the outside. Again, I did not hate this movie like a lot of other people. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of hating The Flash because it is a DC movie or anything like that. Like I said, I did like some stuff. I thought Miller for a lot of scenes, not all of them, but for a lot of scenes, was actually quite good. And that's very hard for me to say, considering they are a very problematic person. But I liked Keaton, I liked Callie. Yeah, but there's, it didn't just stick with me. I had fun watching it, some of it, and then the rest of it was just like, why are we doing this? Why am I not surprised? You had years and years to get this right, and this is what you came up with. It just wasn't good. All right, let's move on. Final category that we'll talk about in this episode anyway is surprises. And the first one I have is Blue Beetle. DC property. I didn't expect anything from Blue Beetle, mainly because I didn't know too much about the character, and also because it was, again, part of the DC movies, which, again, in shambles, not knowing what is sticking around, what isn't, what's getting rebooted and all that. But Warner Brothers Discovery was determined to get these movies out, and for Blue Beetle, which was originally set to come out as a HBO Max movie, they changed their minds, and I'm kind of glad they did, because Blue Beetle was very good, and it was very highly enjoyable. The family dynamic is very good, and it feels real, authentic, and it makes the movie so much better for me, because when the superhero-y tropes and plot points get too much or heavy-handed, the family stuff is there to save it. Some of it gets a little cringy, too much, even for me, the secret past of the grandmother. It's funny the first time, and then they kept going with it, and it just got a little too heavy-handed. I will not be afraid to admit that the dad stuff in here got me. And here as well, I'll get a little spoilery about Blue Beetle. So you have been warned if you have not watched it or you just don't care. Anything really that has to do with dad stuff gets to me. And anything that had to do with the dad before and after he, ends up dying in the movie, it got to me. And when Jaime is talking to him in, the world between worlds or whatever it was, that had me in tears. It is such an effective, dramatic moment. And for someone like me, who I lost my father many years ago, but it's a great hero moment for Jaime, and it's something that I know we probably all have wanted to happen. The experience of it, just to talk to them and see if they're okay, and just hearing that they're okay and we can move on, and we can have that, especially like I said, with a loved one. And we all want that last moment in conversation like that. And I think it hit me even more because this is a Hispanic family. This is a Mexican family that we're dealing with, and being Mexican, it just it's great, seeing not just seeing the representation, but knowing this is you ask any Hispanic person, if they saw Blue Beetle, it's like, do you have a family member like this? And they'll 100%, I guarantee you, say yes, we have a family member like that. That is what our family is like. And I think that's what it was. Now, I admit, I was fighting back tears. I'm not going to lie about that. And for a movie to do that, where I was not expecting anything, and for a superhero movie to do that, and for a movie that came from the DC universe, where, again, we don't know what's going to happen, or at that point, we knew what was going to happen, but we don't know what's going to happen with these next few movies, because this came out, obviously, very early on. That does a lot. And for me to not put that on any sort of list when I got that reaction would be a crime. So I very much like to believe. Is it manipulation? Yeah, probably. But it worked, obviously, since I got it here. Okay, let's move on to the second surprise. I only had 2 surprises this year. And the other surprise is Saw X. Look, yes, I can probably imagine some of your faces. I am surprised too. I have not seen all the Saw movies in their entirety. I know what happens in a lot of them. I really stopped watching them after Saw 3. I saw Jigsaw in theaters. I don't know why, but I did. And the majority of my knowledge for the rest of the Saw movies comes from Dead Meat on YouTube. So even then, I know the first 2 movies, for me anyway, are the best movies, and at least are the ones I've watched. So when it was announced, I'll admit, I was not thrilled about another Saw movie, because I was like, oh, great, another Saw movie. All right, whatever. But they brought back Tobin Bell, which I was like, okay. But they also brought back Shawnee Smith, the best parts, arguably, of the actual movies. And then we learned that this was taking place in between the first movie and the second movie. And that, to me, interested me, because I was like, okay, this is a nice, cool little step that they can do, and they'll see what they do with that. So I always knew that the Saw movies were brutal, like I mentioned, because I watched Dead Meat, and I watch a lot of horror movies. So stuff usually doesn't get to me, really. Like, I'll cringe a little bit in my seat, I'll squirm. But the practical effects of Saw X, I don't know what it was. They were good, that they were making me squirm in my seat. And that is saying something. The actual story for the movie as well is actually good and reasonable too, because of all the, of all that John Kramer, Jigsaw, whatever you want to call him, wanted was a cure, hope that he can be cured of his cancer. And obviously he isn't. And these people just give him and gave everybody else false hope, and they unfortunately screwed over the wrong person. Of all the people, and I think there's a line by someone in the movie, and it said, of all the people you can screw over, you screwed over Jigsaw. So this is a personal revenge movie, and it makes sense. I mean, okay, this is the age-old conversation for the Saw movies, right? Is Jigsaw isn't really a killer because he doesn't technically kill them. First of all, yes, he does, but that's a whole other conversation. But in this movie, it's like, no, he's taking this personal because he is not only, taking his revenge on people who screwed him over, he's taking his revenge on these people because they have done this to other people. They have given false hope to other people, and he knows it, and they're just going to keep doing it. So he is doing this for argument's sake, the right reasons, even though he is a serial killer. So again, heavily, pleasantly surprised by Saw X. I wasn't expecting anything, walked in really liking it, and liking it more than I thought I would. So there you go. All right, so that is part 1 of these lists. Do you agree? Do you disagree with anything here? Either way, be sure to check out part 2 of the 2003 year in review, which will cover the honorable mentions and, of course, my favorites of movies of the years. I'll also give you a preview of the movies that are coming out for the rest of the year of 2024. Thank you for listening to part 1. Go listen to part 2. Check out all the links down below as well. And I will see you on the next one.